This is The Second Studio, hosted by the Architecture and Design Office fame. My name is David Lee, and with me is Marina Borodero. And this week, it's the two of us, and we're going to discuss one of the ways that we start projects with clients, right?
Yes.
The typical way is that the client finds us, we have a meeting, they like us, we like them, they sign the contract, and we go.
Yeah.
But this other route that we're going to describe came as a result of a lot of clients are, for rightfully so, a little bit nervous to do that when they're interviewing a bunch of architects because it's a big commitment. It feels like a big commitment. So what we're discussing today is what we call a project starter service. And within that service, there's a couple of steps, and it culminates in a presentation of a vision package. And all this was designed to alleviate that issue. And I think there are great benefits for clients, and there are also great benefits for architects as well.
Yeah, and that really kind of came about because we kind of came across, either clients who that was their first time doing a project and they're not quite sure like how to commit to someone right away without really knowing them or knowing like how the whole process goes. But also for ourselves, like we want to make sure that the clients we're taking projects on are the good fit.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of our time and our creative minds to design those projects. So you kind of want to make sure that you're not taking on a project that you're not going to be happy working on, because that's what's the point.
So let's talk real quick about some of the challenges that clients face when they're trying to find the correct professional for them. The first one is that I think at times it can feel very, very overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
Because these projects, as most people know, they take between a year to 2 years to 3 years to 4 years. And that's a very long time to be committed to somebody, to a team of professionals, to an architect or a designer and a contractor. And so because of that, it can feel overwhelming. I think also if you're new to a project, you know nothing about this industry and how it all works. And so you're being... Even as you're doing preliminary research online, let's say you're coming across terminology that you just don't know.
Yeah,
like FF&E or scope creep might even be something you're not familiar with, or punch list or concepts or massing or party, whatever else.
Yeah, no, it's like you're thrown into an industry that you know nothing about, and you might have a general understanding based on living in a house and having watched TV and TV shows and stuff, but nothing that I feel is making you feel comfortable or even trusting what's about to happen. And oftentimes, if it's your home, there is a lot at stakes, right? It's the place where you're going to be living forever. It's your biggest investment in your whole life. So there is kind of it's kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big decision, and some people are a bit more inclined into taking risk, kind of blindfolded, and some others aren't.
Yep.
So.
And I think on the flip side, there are some clients who dive into this process and they go with the first person they meet, which is not always the best route.
Yeah.
But so if you're a client and you're interviewing different professionals, there's the basic stuff you look for, right? There's the experience, there's the portfolio, there's references like past clients you're going to speak with. There's all that kind of stuff. But that's kind of like the basics. The real thing that you want to have... The real thing you want to know when you're selecting somebody is whether or not they're going to be a good fit with you. So it's about that working relationship.
Yeah.
We've said it time and time again on this podcast, and many other professionals and clients also agree and will say, you got to find someone you're going to work well with. Even more specifically, there was actually a prospective client who once said to us very wisely that they wanted to find an architect who they could problem solve with. So meaning to say it's a good working relationship, not just when things are going well, but more importantly, when things are not going well, which will happen in a 2-year, 3-year project. How does the team work together to solve those things? Does everyone stay cool? Does everyone speak the same language, and is communication good? And, it's an odd thing because despite that aspect, a working relationship being the most important aspect, it's also the most elusive one, and the one that you frankly just don't know in a way until you start working with someone at least a little bit.
No, yeah, for sure. And again, it's hard to commit to like a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year contractual relationship with someone you just met. I think the other challenges for clients, first timers or not, is kind of the uncertainty of the project scope and also the feasibility of what they're looking to do. You know, a lot of times we come across potential clients or clients who have a rough idea of what they want the house to feel like, but they don't really know like how that would happen. Or on the opposite end, they have like an exhaustive list of like a wish list of like a bunch of million tiny things, right? Which don't necessarily add up to an overall vision, let's say, or kind of get lost into the details. So
and the thing is that all the professionals, the architects and the contractor and the interior designers, like all of us have done this many times before, right? So it's not our first time, and it's nothing new to go through this process that we're going to embark on together. And the strangest thing about working with any of these professionals is that you, the client, and us, no one knows exactly what it's going to be in the end. It's a sort of a question mark, right? We have a vague idea of, okay, yes, it's a house. It's probably approximately this many square feet. Maybe it's limited in story height based on the zoning. And we have a sense of program, and we have a sense of, you know, call it style and direction. But beyond that, I have no idea what it's going to be, right? And that's a very intimidating and I think scary thing for someone who's not gone through the process to just trust someone.
To feel confident in embarking on the process. No, for sure. And so I think the vision package is also a good opportunity to kind of like quickly test those ideas and kind of like clarify the scope, or maybe even just kind of clarify the overall vision. You know, I think clients get often very excited about changing things, you know, even the smallest one, but their head maybe gets kind of like clogged with a lot of random things. So this vision package is really, the starter services is really a way to just kind of like calm everybody down, look at the bigger picture.
And on the other side of the table, I think this initial onboarding phase does have challenges for the architects, the designers, and the contractors, and all the professionals. And it's really, in a way, it's the same thing as the same challenges as the clients face. We don't know exactly who this client is. And, you know, none of us have any interest in working with someone who we're not going to get along with. And we also don't have any interest working on a project that's not going to turn out well. And as much of our mind reading capabilities as we like to try and use, and we have crystal balls to try and figure out who's a good match for us, we also don't know really until we start working with somebody. And I think that's an important aspect too. So everyone is kind of in the same boat together in a sense of trying to find that perfect match.
And, you know, and I think it's healthier to admit that it's not a match and like they should work with another architect, or you should just not work on their project, rather than trying to force something if at the beginning everybody kind of has a sense that it's not going to work out. Because it's going to be a huge waste of time. It's going to be a waste of money. It won't have any good energy. The project is not going to turn out. So it goes both ways. So based on all of these challenges, that's really why we created our project starter service that culminates into a vision package. Because it seems like there is a need from both sides, the client side, but also the architect side, to kind of have this initial step happening before anything could move further. So
let me give a quick overview of what the Project Starter Service is, and then we can talk about the different steps in greater detail. It is a fixed fee, short turnaround service that has 6 different steps to it, and it culminates in a presentation of what we call a vision package. And the vision package has, let's say, 2 halves to it. There's an analysis component, a feasibility and design analysis component, and then there's actually preliminary design work in the vision package. So now let's say you found us, you found our website, you're not sure if you want to hire us or not, but you're interested in the Project Starter service. Then what happens? The first thing we do is provide the potential client a pretty detailed list of all the things they're going to get at the end of the service and the steps we go through in that service itself. I think that we're pretty big believers in making sure people have the information they want to have, and they're also as informed as we think they need to be. So in fact, if you go to like our office website, we list all the stuff that happens in the Project Starter service and all the deliverables of it. We even go as far as to provide excerpts and samples of previous services we've done, kind of chopped up, so we don't give away any good secrets to these people, so that way they know in the back of their minds roughly what they're getting, although each service always produces a different result in the end. Yeah, and so once the potential client agrees to move forward with those services, there is kind of like about 6 steps that happens.
The first one is always a questionnaire. And we usually ask both, if it's a couple, both partners to fill out the questionnaire because we tend to get more information that way than if, let's say, they just fill it out for the both of them. In those questionnaires, you would find questions such as, well, the scope of services. Is it architecture, interiors, architecture and interiors? Is there furnishing too? Is it a remodel? Is it a new construction? We also ask about schedule. When are you looking to start? When are you looking to complete the project? Of course, we talk about budget because we need to have some sort of understanding of what can that entail in terms of design.
Yeah. And all those things are really fundamental and basic, but that's always budget, schedule, and scope. You have to know those three. If you don't know those three, it's really hard to work actually on the project and know the frame of reference.
Yeah, and you have to be comfortable to talking about this, the budget and the schedule. If a client is a little bit reticent in talking about budget, to me, it's kind of a red flag because we don't build things for free. So we need to be able to talk about the cost of things and we need to be able to talk about it openly. And same with schedule. If schedule, there is like very important dates, we need to be able to be like, hey, you know what? I don't think it's feasible.
Sure.
Or, maybe it is, but we're going to need to kind of be super efficient.
And a quick note on the budget, it doesn't mean that as a client, you have to know precisely what your budget is. Part of the reason for doing the starter service is to finesse that a little bit, to have an understanding, because clients are always saying, I don't want to tell you my budget because I have no idea how much things cost. And then the professionals are always saying, you got to give me a budget because I don't know what I can do if I don't have a budget. And the truth is, it doesn't really matter who states the number first. It should be the client because it's a working number, right? It'll evolve and change. That said, though, if a client says, I want to build a 5,000 square foot home for $2 million or $1 million, it's like, no way. That's not going to happen, right? A ground up home that's meant to be like very high end and fancy. It's not feasible. So there's a big difference between a budget that is, $1 million versus $10 million or $50,000 versus $500,000. And if you're a client, you probably have a sense on a magnitude of like 1 to 10, roughly where you are in that scale. And even if you're off by 25% in terms of how much you're actually going to pay, or 50%, it's still closer than is better than nothing.
Yeah, it could also just be a bracket of number. It doesn't need to be one number, but it kind of helps framing the scope as well. Let's say if the scope list is very extensive, but the project seems a bit small, then that just means we might need to prioritize the scope of the project or even phase it over the course of however many years in order to do everything that's on that list. But it's information that is helpful for us and that we will put together in a way that makes sense for the project to be able to move forward in one direction or another. Other things that we ask on those questionnaire is, of course, the taste and style of things that our clients are into. We don't do traditional. So if a potential client comes to us and wants to do something that's extremely craftsman, traditional, whatever style, we're not a good fit. Yeah. So we need to make sure that this is going to work. We also ask simple things to understand their style too, such as the brands that they love or artists that they love or movies that they like, just to kind of, again, trying to gauge their personality and interest and give us some sort of direction for what design route we should be exploring.
It's really, the questionnaire is designed partially so that we can, in a quick way, get a decent understanding of who we're designing for. And that's very difficult to do in just a couple meetings in a short period of time. So the questionnaire that we've developed over time has kind of odd questions to get at those root answers. The other category of the questionnaire is who's going to be living, and because we do residential, who's living in the house and how are they occupying the house, right? Do you entertain often? Is it like I was talking to someone on the phone recently, a potential client, and they were saying, okay, I'm trying to find an architect to do this type of house for me. I said, okay, good. Who's going to live in the house? And they asked this question with total earnesty, and they didn't mean to be rude. They're like, why does that matter? And I said, it matters greatly because if I'm designing a house for a bachelor, a 21-year-old, tech kid that's very different than if I design a house for a family of 6 or a family of 4, and then their grandparents are going to be moving in with them. Like there's different scenarios.
Yeah.
So understanding the use and occupants is another aspect. And then tied with it also is what we call an architecture program. And program more or less means the activities that are going to take place and a rough understanding of the spaces required because of that. So like living room, bathroom, bedroom counts are considered program.
And then, of course, we ask more maybe elusive questions about like maybe what is the mission statement you want this project to be? What is the main goal of doing this project? Is it just because your house is outdated or you want to transform your lifestyle? You want to become a new person? Like what is kind of the ultimate goal beyond the function? And it's interesting because we actually take these questionnaire responses extremely seriously, and we do find a lot of information to help us design the project. And sometimes you can tell if the potential client doesn't really care about the questionnaire. Like the answers are very kind of not low quality answers, but they haven't put much time and thoughts into it. And some other time it's the complete opposite. They actually have thought about it for a while, and you can feel it through their answers.
And it's all about analysis, right? Like the analogy that you use often is comparing all of this process to like visiting a doctor. A doctor can do a fair amount of analysis without asking you a lot of questions, let's say perhaps, if there's tests they can do. And it's sort of similar for us. So the quality of the solutions that we propose is always directly related to the analysis and the quality of the information we get at the beginning, right? If it's bad information, it doesn't matter how talented we are, the solution's not going to make sense for the client. And tied to that too, we also like to ask people, like what parts of their current house do they like and not like, and do they use the most and use the least? And what parts of the new house do they expect to use the most and least? Or what parts of the new property do they like the most and least? And it's not just about knowing the specific spaces. It's about kind of tapping into that thinking that clients can have to kind of dissect how they live. And then they realize, oh, actually my favorite part of this house is this one nook because it gets sunlight. And that can become the starting point, the germ for a whole project in a way.
Yeah. The second step to the project starter service is gathering all of the existing documents about the house, right? So we ask the clients, do you have any existing blueprint? Do you have any PDF? Did your realtor give you anything? We will need some sort of drawings for us to get started on our studies. And sometimes we can do those drawings ourselves. Some other times we might need to hire professional surveyors to get those accurately. You know, depending if it's on an interior scope, an exterior scope, if it's like an empty lot of land, you know, we might need a site survey for that. But regardless of any scope and any project, those documents would be, you know, where we start from. So, you know, beyond the project starter service, it's still something that the client will have to get at some point to get the project started.
Yeah, no, that's another good point too, is that none of these materials are wasted materials because they're going to be used if the project moves forward, regardless of what professional you end up working with.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to need a survey done. So it's not money wasted.
So after we have those documents and the answers to the questionnaire, the next thing that we do is step 3 is we have a virtual meeting to review those answers. And it's actually very interesting because, you know, oftentimes people fill that out and like, okay, they got their answers, like we can, you know, start designing. But no, actually this is kind of just a conversation starter in some ways. Yeah. Like we go back, look at those questions and those answers, talk about it in more detail. And a lot of time we would extract more information from people talking about their answers than just by looking at their answers, which is very interesting. During that specific meeting too, what we like to do is show a bunch of what we call reference images. And again, it's kind of like to test the immediate reaction feedback from those potential clients when they see things. Yeah. And it could be about anything. It could be, you know...
the images?
The images, yeah. They could be a piece of furniture. It could be a piece of artwork. It could be a house, an interior.
It could be a landscape.
It could be an outfit. It could be anything.
Yeah.
But again, we're trying to nail down their personalities, right? In many ways.
It's sort of like spending a day with a person, but you're cramming in or spending a week with someone and touring a bunch of things and sightseeing, which in that process you learn who they are, but you're shoving it into a very condensed period of time because you're not walking around. You're just blasting through images. And so that, yeah, those conversations are very, very fruitful. And it's also interesting too, when we're designing for couples, that they oftentimes don't know their partner as well as they think they do, or don't know their sensibilities as well.
While in talking about couples, it's also a very good way to understand the dynamic between the couple.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have people who are very in tune with each other, and there is like a good energy. Some other times you can tell they have each very different personalities. And it's important for us to make sure that the design that we come up with satisfy both of those personalities in as many ways as possible.
Yeah. And of course, it's giving us insights as to how the the teamwork process and relationship is gonna be like. And the other thing, the fourth step that takes place, which might have already happened at this point, depending on the project, is we visit the site, which is pretty basic, but also very important. In many cases, we visit the property, we visit the home, if it's going to be a remodel, with the client. We walk around, we talk about stuff, we take pictures. And it's, again, to have another touch point with the client in a new arena, but it's also, of course, for us to absorb all of the meaning of the place and what it has to offer.
The step after that, so we basically have all of our ingredients on the table. Right now we can start kind of like playing with the recipe a little bit. So the vision package, depending on the size of the scope and the project, could be between, let's say, 1 to 4 weeks to be completed. So it's fairly quick, right?
Yep.
And we go from an analysis portion of it into kind of like a design concept study, right?
Right.
So the analysis, for example, would be analysis of the property and the house, if there is an existing house. We look at things such as, like restrictions, zoning restrictions, site restriction, climate orientation, kind of like all of those basic diagrams.
Yeah, sun, wind.
All of those given components that already are on the site.
And in the case of an existing house, of course, it's an analysis, a design analysis of that existing structure. So understanding its architectural language, its limitations, where it's not working out so well, which is always the case, and then where there's potential, of course, as well.
And sometimes it could be also looking at things that maybe are a little bit... like I'm thinking like furnishing. Maybe the house is not working well because the furniture layout doesn't make sense. Maybe the house is not working well because the program and the different functions that compose the house are in a place that is just not working.
Yeah.
So we're kind of looking at it with a lot of different layers and eyes to kind of dissect what is good and what is bad, what needs to be tossed, what needs to be kind of like enhanced and or brought back to life in some ways.
Yeah, exactly. And I think sometimes clients who don't know this process are very curious as to what's included in like the design analysis, because the design analysis as a phrase is pretty broad. And the answer is we take time to look at every single aspect, all the things you mentioned, all the stuff I mentioned, you throw layer on that, material, sustainability, like everything you could possibly think of. And we focus on the things that are the biggest issues for the particular project. So it does vary from vision package to vision package, right?
Yeah.
Depending on all the different circumstances.
People listening to this might be wondering, like, wow, what kind of deliverables are you using in order to explain these ideas, right?
Like, what am I going to see?
What are you going to see?
Right.
Well, you might see things like photos of the house that exist or the site with a bunch of notes, things that just jump to our eyes, the things that we notice could be better or terrible or absolutely awesome that we should really focus on, right? That's one way to explain those ideas. Another one could be just to have kind of like boxes, diagrams, and arrows just to explain an idea. Another one could be to take the existing floor plan and kind of like dissecting it, with colors and relationship diagrams and kind of things like that. Because there is kind of a lot of things that gets extracted from that analysis phase, it's important to put a visual that's clear on it for people to really grasp on those ideas rather than just dismissing them because they don't understand them.
I agree. And it's an interesting thing because one of the challenging things with with projects is there can be in the beginning a lot of talking about ideas, a lot of talking about observations of issues we see, but it's not very visceral. It's not real until you see representation of it. And I think that representation is important. It's also interesting because a lot of times a photograph, let's say if it's a remodel project, a photograph of the existing house or the property allows us and the clients to more easily see the truth of what's there. Versus when you're in person on site walking throughout a property or a home, there's a lot of information coming in and it's very easy to not see the bigger picture, right? Or not to see the large architectural geometries that are happening, or the fact that the program doesn't make sense, or all the other things that we mentioned about, right? But you take a photograph and it's just a photograph of this one thing. You say, look at that thing. It's not right. It's very, very clear that it's there.
Yeah, no, I feel like a lot of people too, when they first meet a designer or an architect, they want the expert's opinion. Mm-hmm. They want to think like, well, they want to know like what you experts think of this, like honestly, right? So we kind of lay it all out, and then we can kind of, choose and pick from that list.
The second part to the vision package is the project goals chapter, right? It's its own chapter in the vision package. It's not very long because it's basically more or less a one-page concept statement, a written verbal statement, maybe some diagrams. But we do find that stating very clearly and explicitly the goals of the project in centered font, it is very important because it sets the framework for everything else, and it sets the tone for everything else and gives us a direction. Now, it's not to say that the project statement, the project goal mission statement that we put in this vision package is it, and it's written in stone. Of course not. It might change. It might be slightly off, but it again provides everyone, I think especially the client, something to work off of. So when we go later on the package and look at the proposals, we see, okay, this is in response to this vision statement that we've created.
Yeah.
And it's not random. We're not doing things randomly because it looks
no
good.
And I mean, some offices do. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
Like we usually start with things that are given to us and start from there. Otherwise, it's completely random.
So the next part of the vision package is the fun stuff, which is the concept sketches. And we typically produce 2 to 3 different options, right? The concept sketches vary. In many cases, it varies depending on the size of the project and its location, the topography, and all that stuff. But in many cases, we're talking about 3 floor plan options, right? So the floor plans that we produce, like they're not loose, unscaled, inaccurate sketches. They're very accurate floor plans, but nonetheless, they're conceptual because this is the first round of them. In the case of a new home, they might be 3 different options that all kind of execute the same larger vision, but in very different ways. Maybe the house is one long bar versus being 3 separate structures versus being one semi-lawn structure, then another, one that's flowing out in the backyard or whatever it's going to be. And in the case of remodel, the 3 options tend to align with different scopes of work, right? So like here's one option where you can do like the least amount of work, which is typically how we structure the presentation. The second option is a little more work. And the third is the most work still within the vicinity of what the scope is anticipated to be.
And each of those floor plans, we always show furnishing layout as well.
Yeah.
Well, first because we do both interior architecture and architecture, but also because it's crucial in understanding how the spaces are being used or could be used. So we always do that. The next thing we do after those floor plan sketches is actually explaining them in a more analytical way, right? Because it's important to look at, let's say, the views of the rooms, or like the circulation, the flow of the spaces, from one end to the other of the house. And just looking at the floor plan, the way a floor plan looks like might not always stand out. So we kind of overlay this information onto different layers to be able to express that again to the clients.
That's also a good point, because if you were to take the existing floor plan and the new floor plan, if we're doing a remodel, it's a lot of times it's very, very clear graphically that they're different. But the specific 20 reasons why our new floor plan is better than the existing are not evident unless you're trained in reading floor plans and you're probably like a good architect or designer, you're not going to see all the nuances and the magical moments that are happening in the new floor plan. So I extracting that information as diagrams or as text, the same way we did for the existing, is also very useful, so you can compare apples to apples, so to speak.
And then the last thing that concludes this vision package is, a few pages of reference images for maybe some of the key spaces in the house, or maybe, like some overall feeling of what the new property wants to be like.
Mood.
And after having those initial conversation and questions with that potential client, we have a pretty good idea of like what the thing will look like in our head, right? So we kind of put that on paper because it also helps them imagine based on those sketches and those images what that could become. It's also a way for clients to feel excited, because it's a lot of information. Like the whole analysis and sketch plans it's heavy and it's not sexy stuff, Let's just put it this way. It's technical, it's heavy, it's loaded with meaning and functions and rational, right? So you kind of need to end on a lighter note, get everybody excited, and get to think about like that image you have in your head a little bit more.
Yeah, in a way, the vision package is sort of like the storyboarding process that writers do and animators do when they're producing a film, right? They storyboard it out.
Yeah.
So it's not a full design or anything like that, but it's enough to get you to give you a vision, a visualization of what things could become, this painting of a picture of the potential of what could take place. So that's the vision package, right? There's the feasibility and analysis portion. There's the project goals. There's the concept sketches, oftentimes plans, and then some mood images to kind of round out the whole thing. Then in the project starter service, the next step after we produce all that work is to have a meeting. To have a meeting with the client where we present each slide of this vision package. We talk about each of the slides and the pros and cons of the different options and the different considerations. And it's a good opportunity, I think, for clients to see our work and how we convey our work graphically, how we present, and also how we converse. Because that presentation is not just, okay, we're going to talk for an hour and a half and then you sign off and then see you later. There's a pretty extensive conversation that goes with it about sometimes it's very specific things that they pick up on, like, oh, I really like to have 2 sinks or whatever it is, and sometimes it's much larger stuff. Most of the time, though, by the time when we're finished with the presentation, no one's going to fuss over its tiny details because it's very clear the purpose of all this, and usually people are very, very excited. They're like, all right, this is good. Can we build it tomorrow? And we're like, not exactly.
Yeah, it's very exciting. And the way that meeting usually ends is that we talk about what the next steps would be. And we also give kind of an overview of, the typical design and building process of a project.
So after the meeting, we send to the client the vision package. We also send them a project process PDF, which is something we created for the office, which outlines the big phases of the design and construction process, like concept design, schematic design, design development, et cetera, et cetera. That PDF also has some visuals of the deliverables we produce throughout, so they know what to expect, like when they're going to see 3D renderings and things like that. And of course, the vision package can sometimes be enough to show one of those plan options to the contractor, if there's a contractor on board, and say, this is roughly the scope of work I'm thinking. Give me a ballpark here, like a range of what this is going to cost me. Now, I've said many times before, contractors, a lot of them don't like doing that, and I totally get it. But again, at this early phase, it's not to have a precise number, it's to have a ballpark. Because someone quoting you $500 a square foot versus $1,000, that's like super different, right? And even though it's just a floor plan, it's still better than nothing, right? It's still a visual aid that can be used so they can see the quality of the project, especially when it's paired with reference images.
So just to clarify some things in case, some people might still have questions about what this vision package is. It is not a construction document set, right? We're just talking about preliminary conceptual floor plan layouts. That's what we're looking at. It's the first step that we would take on to design any building, right? It's the first sketch. But to get to the actual construction documents, many sketch needs to happen.
Yeah.
Right. I'm not saying that many different ideas and layout need to happen, but a lot of refinement and things need to be figured out to get to the construction document level. It's also not a full design, right? In those vision package, we're mostly concerned with floor plan, program, flow, overall concept. But there, we're not going to design all of the rooms in details, the elevations, the materiality. That's not there.
To put in perspective, even if it's the conceptual foundation and therefore in some ways the most important aspect of design, in terms of the amount of time in a project and the amount of production and effort, it's probably like 5% of the design process. So so people who don't know, it's very, very small. It's also not a drafting service. So based on the work we do, we cater to a certain audience, but even if we did other types of projects, I think there's oftentimes a confusion clients have between architects and draftspeople who might be licensed, or a lot of times are not licensed but claim to be architects. And basically what I'm saying is that this is not like a cheap $200 give me a floor plan service. That's not what it is. And obviously, if we go through the effort of trying to understand the client like we do, and we produce the concept sketches, this is much more involved than just bang out some floor plans for me so I can build a spec home.
Yeah, and to that point, that service is not free, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes we are being interviewed on potential projects with other architects being considered for the job. Mm-hmm. And we don't do sketches and studies and this whole, initial phases for free. We are interested in the work that we do in providing the best work that we do. So throwing out freebies that don't make any sense and are not tied to anything, to me, is not helpful to anybody.
No, it's not a good idea. The other question folks might have is, who is this service for? Obviously, it's for clients. It's for also people who are nervous about the process, perhaps, but also serious about doing a project.
And in terms of scope, it could be for anyone who has like a plot of land when there is nothing on it, they want to build new. Mm-hmm. It could be someone who's looking to do like an extensive remodel or addition. Or it could also be maybe for somebody who's trying to do a more modest home remodel. Yeah. And they need some guidance.
Yeah, because as you've probably heard, a lot of the Project Starter service is about analysis, yes, but also about exploration and thinking and helping the client work through all the different potentials, right? Because there's a million ways that things can go, and help them refine it or get a better understanding of what the ingredients are and therefore the direction you should take.
So I think we should talk about maybe some of the benefits. For clients, but also for architects. Yeah. So for clients, what are the benefits?
Well, the biggest one is that it's a fixed fee service. Yep. And every client for any industry, any service loves that. You know exactly what you're paying. It's also a fixed scope. So you know more or less exactly what you're getting. Like the breadth of the work and the process is very clearly outlined. Again, the results are not outlined and specific because it's going to depend on who you are, and we cater and create custom things. But those are known factors, and it provides a lot more assurance to clients rather than saying, you have no idea what I'm going to do in this process, but sign on this giant big contract with me for the next 2 years and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and the next thing too, I think, is that it's pretty short turnaround. So you don't have to wait 6 months for somebody to come up with, a concept sketch. Like you pay the fee to buy that package and you get it within a few weeks, and you kind of know a little bit more like if what you're looking to do is feasible.
Yeah. The other benefit, I think, is that it is a trial run. And this might be the biggest benefit, is that it gives us, again, both of us, an opportunity to work together a little bit and to see what it's like.
Well, it's kind of like when you buy clothes. Like if you buy, let's say, final sale, but you didn't get to try it on first.
Yeah.
It's kind of a risk it's not going to fit and you're going to be stuck with it, right? Or if you buy it and you have 30 days to return it, you can try it on at home and send it back if it's not working out. So it's kind of that. I like the no commitment idea, or I like the idea that the commitment is still on the table, that you could choose to commit or not commit after it. I think that's pretty advantageous. The last thing is probably, to me, that it's useful. Like the documents that you're going to get is going to be useful no matter if you're going with us or someone else. Like your project has started, but it has started in a way that you're not committed yet to anything, which is kind of like the best of both worlds, right?
Yeah, because any design and architecture project is going to start with analysis, or should start with an analysis and feasibility study to see what's possible, right? And that's a big part of what this is that. And so at the end of it, we always joke that if you like the materials, you like us, we keep working together. For some reason you like the materials, but you decide that you hate our faces, then you just keep the materials and just work with someone else and see how it goes.
And maybe you'll come back to us.
I do think there are benefits for architects as well, which I want to touch on. It's basically so that we can evaluate clients.
Yeah, and I actually honestly wish that more architects were offering that service as well, because, too many times we come across clients or potential clients who work with someone originally, didn't work out, had to move on to someone else. So I think it just makes it more efficient and less time wasted for everybody.
Yeah, in a way. And it's also a means for us to control the process. Control might sound kind of a harsh word, but that's exactly what we're doing. We're controlling the process. So this is, the starter surface is also not, like you said, full design. It's also not where the client is going to have feedback and then we make changes based on their feedback. That's not what happens. It's very clear. We do analysis, we do the work, we do the presentation, then we're done with the starter service. If you want to move forward and you want us to do revisions or do some other work, then you sign with us.
Well, and it's a way to show our expertise.
Okay.
And show our value to the clients, and either they get it or they don't.
And I think there's the final benefit is for both parties, is that you are really establishing hopefully a strong foundation, and you're establishing a good path for the rest of the project. And what's interesting is that, sometimes projects, it requires a fair amount of iteration and concept design. You try a bunch of different things. You're testing different directions before you find the one. But it for whatever reason, it tends to be with these project starter services and these vision packages. Most often, one of the directions we developed in that ends up being, at least broadly, the direction of the entire project. And now I'm just thinking out loud, but I suspect it's because of the attention that we give to the analysis portion, trying to understand all the factors so that when we're producing something, we're close to hitting the mark. And again, we're not just like throwing a dart in the dark and hoping we hit bullseye.
So some listeners might be wondering, what is the difference between, embarking into a project starter service versus just hiring us for the full thing?
Yeah, from the get-go?
Yeah.
It's a good question. There's not much difference in a certain way, right? Because it's all about laying the foundation. Part of the reason for the service is to lay the foundation for the project. So our process is always structured to have analysis, concept design, schematic design, design development, construction documents. Somewhere in that last two phases, permitting happens, and then, construction and closing out and everything else. But that's the process. And so the project starter services is the majority or good portion of analysis, and it's just a little bit of concept design. It's the first pass. It's the first presentation. And usually in each of the phases, there's a handful or a number of presentations that take place, depending on the phase that you're in, to propose something, have a conversation. We go back to our desks, revise it, come up with new options, show again, have another conversation. So it's a back and forth. So in other words, what I'm saying, it's not like we do this service and then we immediately move on to the next phase, which is schematic design. And if it's a small enough project and it happens that it's correct, then yes, that can take place. But most of the time, no. The three concept sketches that are in the vision package are just the first presentation of the concept design phase. And there's going to be another 3 or 4 presentations potentially.
And so to conclude this recording, I think there's maybe some final benefits that we could mention. And cool. One of the ones that I think is pretty important is that basically this gives the opportunity for clients to see the ideas that they had in their head on paper.
For the first time,
For the first time. And that's also probably why they get very excited after they see the project starter service, because it's like, okay, now I can breathe. I have a better understanding of what the project is going to be. And I think it's great for them because it puts their thoughts on paper, but I think also it gives them more confidence into moving forward with those thoughts.
Yeah.
Because when you can't really visualize things or put it together, it's more like vague ideas. I can understand that it's very hard to commit to hiring someone and starting taking down your house and
Sure.
hoping that, you know what, we're going to come up with a better floor plan and a better design. Like, it's a risk.
One of the kind of odd things that happens in this initial phase, right, before anyone's hired, is that a client who, let's say, is a little more type A personality and a bit apprehensive, not gone through this process before, they will attempt to control the to-be process and control the budget and control the amount of effort and just control what hasn't happened yet by doing a lot of talking, by asking a lot of questions, specifically so that they can control the outcome. And I understand why they do that, but I will say that it does not work, right? Because design and architecture is one of those things where you have to put pen to paper. That's the only way you actually make progress, and it's the only way you actually test ideas and assumptions to see whether or not they work for design reasons, for construction cost reasons, for construction reasons, for all those reasons. So that's a note I want to make, because I do see it sometimes with clients where they just, it's a lot of talking, and they hope the more we talk, the more that we can narrow it down and have like a complete fixed number for the entire thing or know exactly what's going to happen. And that is not the game that we play, or any architecture or any interior design office plays. It's very, I think you said it earlier, it's very much a profession and as a business and a process of, risk taking. Not controlled risk, like estimated risk, calculated risk taking. And if you want to actually make progress in your project, and also you want to save money or be more efficient, then you got to start. I know it's counterintuitive. You think by like doing all the initial thinking in advance and doing all this extra conversation that you're going to have it be more efficient once it starts. It's not the case. If anything, you're kind of slowing it down.
Yeah, and I think that's really the benefit of the starter service, because sometimes that might, shift the way the client's mindset was working prior to it.
Yeah.
And I think it's about feeling more confident. I think it's about having a better understanding before jumping in the project. So
yeah, and it's fun too. I'm telling you, like when we do those presentations, there's always kind of an epiphany or eureka moment that people have, and it's exciting to see. Because now there's life to the project. It looks like this real thing, and there's like, you can see it in their eyes. It's like, oh, I see it. Let's go. Like, yeah, let's go. This is exciting. Let's do it. So a quick recap to what the project starter service entails. Step 1 is the client questionnaire. Step 2 is getting the existing drawings of the property of the house. Step 3 is having a meeting to review that questionnaire with the clients and to get more information from them. The next step is to then visit the property, which might take place in the beginning or somewhere in there. Visit the property, visit the house with the client, walk through it. And then 5, we do the work itself for the vision package. And then finally, we have the meeting to present the vision package, talk about next steps, talk about the pros and the cons, and answer any questions too. So I think that's also a benefit, that throughout this, we're available for clients to ask as many questions as they want.
Yeah.
We're kind of your hired resource in a certain sense.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, what happens? We don't know. We work together or we don't.
Up to you.
Either way, hopefully we had some fun for a little bit.
Yeah. If you're curious about, looking into our vision package, or if you have any questions, you can email us directly.
Yeah. Happy to answer them.
Happy to answer them. You can use the podcast platform or the office website, whatever way works. Thanks again for everybody for listening to this episode. We had a lot of fun kind of sharing how we do things or some of our things. If you have any questions, any comments, anything you want to share, any thoughts, any tips you want to share, you can reach out to us. The website is secondstudiopod.com. You can also email hello@secondstudiopod.com. We have the hotline 213-222-6950 that you can call or leave a voicemail or send a text message. We're also on most social media, really mostly on Instagram, both the office and the podcast. We are also, all of our podcast is on YouTube, or the video episodes are on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, what else?
Yeah, I'll be everywhere.
Everywhere. Looking for us, just turn around, we're probably behind you.
Yeah, that's exactly it. All right, that sounds good. Good.
Okay, thank you so much.
Bye.